They laughed at my burning house and posted it online. 3 years later, I had my revenge. At 29, I thought I understood the depths of human cruelty, but nothing could have prepared me for what my own flesh and blood would do to me in my darkest hour. When my rental house went up in flames 3 years ago, my family didn't just fail to help me, they turned my devastation into their entertainment. And what they didn't realize was that I was quietly documenting every single moment of their betrayal, building a case that would eventually destroy them in ways they never saw coming. Let me paint you the picture of that night that changed everything. I'd been living independently for about 18 months, finally free from the suffocating dysfunction of my family dynamic. My father, Christopher, has always been this larger-than-life figure who turns everything into a competition. My older brother, Marcus, is basically his carbon copy with this obsession about personal responsibility and manning up, and my sister, Victoria, well, she's perfected the art of smiling to your face while screenshotting your private messages for the family group chat. My mother, Patricia, tries to play peacekeeper, but she's mastered this look that screams, "I warned you so," without saying a word. The rental wasn't anything spectacular, just a modest place in a working-class neighborhood, but it represented something profound to me: independence, peace, the ability to live without someone constantly breathing down my neck or analyzing my every decision. For those first few months, life felt manageable in a way it never had before. I had my routines, paid my bills on time, kept to myself, and honestly, I was thriving in that quiet, unremarkable way that probably annoyed them more than any dramatic failure would have. Then that October night happened, and everything I thought I knew about the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally got turned completely upside down. I'd been scrolling through my phone around midnight when this acrid smell started creeping into my consciousness. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it, maybe I'd left something on the stove. Maybe a neighbor was having a late barbecue. But then the smoke alarm started shrieking, and suddenly my entire world was crackling with orange light and the sound of my life literally going up in smoke. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, my phone, didn't even think to put on shoes, just bolted through the front door as flames were already licking at the windows behind me. Standing there on the curb in my bare feet, watching the fire department arrive with their sirens wailing and their hoses unrolling, I felt this strange disconnection from reality, like I was watching someone else's catastrophe unfold in slow motion. Marcus was the first person I called because despite everything, some part of me still believed that when things got truly serious, family would step up. He actually answered, listened to me explain what was happening, and said he'd be right over. For maybe 20 minutes, I allowed myself to hope that this crisis might actually bring out the best in people who'd spent years bringing out the worst in me. But when that convoy of cars pulled up to my burning house, I realized I'd made a fundamental miscalculation about human nature. Marcus climbed out first, took one look at the flames consuming my home, and immediately pulled out his phone to start filming. Not to document the tragedy for insurance purposes, not to help me process what was happening, but because he thought my devastation was genuinely hilarious. Christopher emerged from the passenger seat shaking his head with this expression of smug vindication, like my house fire was somehow proof of a point he'd been trying to make for years. Victoria stepped out of her car in heels that immediately sank into the wet grass, surveyed the destruction, and said with this theatrical gasp, "Wow, karma really does work its magic, doesn't it?" Then she started taking selfies with my burning house as the backdrop, posing like she was at some Instagram-worthy event instead of her brother's personal apocalypse. Her fiance David just stood there watching this performance with the kind of uncomfortable fascination you'd have watching a car accident. Patricia hung back by the vehicles with her arms crossed, maintaining that carefully neutral expression she perfected over decades of family dysfunction. When I tried to approach them, try to say something, anything, my throat felt like sandpaper and the words just wouldn't come. So I leaned against the mailbox and watched my family turn my tragedy into their entertainment. Marcus kept providing this running commentary for his video, saying things like, "Yes, that's what happens when you abandon your family, right? And some people just attract disaster wherever they go." Christopher looked me dead in the eyes with this cold satisfaction and said, "You brought this on yourself, son. Some people are just cursed to fail." The casualness of his cruelty, the way he delivered that devastating judgment like he was commenting on the weather, it hit me like a physical blow. I stared back at him and whispered, "Thanks for showing me who you really are." I didn't scream, didn't break down, just acknowledged the truth that was crystallizing in front of me. He shrugged and turned away like my pain was boring him. The fire captain was discussing insurance procedures with someone, but I couldn't focus on anything except the surreal theater playing out in front of me. Marcus walked over and slapped my shoulder with this fake brotherly gesture, not hard enough to hurt but definitely not gentle, saying, "Tough break, man." When I pushed his hand away, he actually smirked and stepped back like he'd accomplished something. Victoria was holding court about how she'd always sensed something ominous about this house, how it was so typical that I'd be the one to experience a house fire, like disaster followed me around by choice. When David tried to convince her to leave, she rolled her eyes and kept snapping pictures. I told her to stop and delete the photos, and she said, "What's the point? It's not like you're going to post them anywhere." When I actually reached for her phone, she jerked it away and slapped my hand like I was some kind of threat. Christopher started lecturing me about learning from this experience, about how maybe now I'd understand why family unity matters, why you don't just walk away from the people who know you best. I said, "Yeah, you're really demonstrating that family loyalty right now." He rolled his eyes, walked back to his car, and slammed the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. Patricia finally approached me, handed me a bottle of water, and said, "You should come home tonight." When I told her I'd figure something out on my own, she shrugged and said, "Well, I tried." They stayed for maybe 20 minutes total, just long enough for the fire trucks to finish their initial response, long enough for Marcus to get plenty of footage, long enough for Victoria to capture the perfect tragedy selfie. When they finally left, Victoria slammed her car door so hard it echoed down the entire street. I stood there watching their taillights disappear, and several neighbors approached asking if I was okay, if I needed a place to crash for the night. I told them I'd manage because accepting help from strangers felt less humiliating than accepting help from family who'd already made it clear what they thought of my situation. The next morning, Marcus sent me a text message that was just a photo of my burned house with a crying, laughing emoji. I didn't respond because what do you say to something like that? Victoria posted a picture of herself and David at brunch with the caption, "Some people just can't stop burning bridges." And I realized she was actually proud of her clever wordplay about my literal burned house. Patricia called once and left a voicemail saying she hoped I was okay and to let her know if I changed my mind about coming home. Christopher never called at all, which honestly felt more honest than fake concern would have. This is just how my family operates when you refuse to play their games of manipulation and control. I'd always been the outsider because I wouldn't take sides in their petty feuds, wouldn't help Christopher with his endless projects that were really just free labor, wouldn't enable Marcus with his constant drama, wouldn't babysit for Victoria when she needed backup childcare. I carved out my own path, and they resented that independence more than any direct confrontation. But seeing them literally laugh at my house burning down, watching them turn my crisis into content for their social media, that crystallized something that had been building for years. I promised myself that night that I would never again put myself in a position where they could treat me like their personal entertainment, their family scapegoat, their designated failure. I spent the next several months rebuilding my life, dealing with insurance companies, finding a new place, replacing everything I'd lost. And during that entire process, my family kept finding these small, calculated ways to remind me that I was still the outsider, still the one they could mock without consequences. The weird part was how they'd disappear for weeks at a time, then suddenly resurface in the family group chat with some perfectly timed humiliation. 2 months after the fire, I woke up to find myself tagged in a meme someone had created a photo of a dumpster fire with the text "Michael's housewarming party" superimposed over it. Marcus reacted with the skull emoji, Victoria added crying laughing emojis, Christopher said nothing, and Patricia sent a sad puppy sticker, which was about as much emotional support as she ever provided. I didn't respond because engaging would just give them more ammunition, but part of me was documenting everything, screenshotting every cruel joke, every casual cruelty, every moment they revealed their true character. I wasn't sure why I was collecting this evidence, but something told me it would matter eventually. Victoria texted me on my birthday saying, "Hope you're not celebrating with candles tonight. LOL." When I posted a picture of my new apartment on Instagram, Marcus immediately commented, "Looks flammable," then deleted it a few hours later like he wanted me to know he was watching but didn't want to leave permanent evidence. About a year after the fire, Victoria invited me to her engagement party via Snapchat, not even a real invitation, just a casual message saying, "Hope you can make it. Try not to burn the place down." I left her on read, then watched the family group chat explode with photos from the event, group shots and toasts, and someone even posted a poll about who was most likely to ruin the night. Marcus voted for me even though I wasn't there. Later that evening, Victoria sent me a video panning across everyone at some upscale restaurant, then zooming in on an empty chair at the end of the table saying, "Guess who's missing?" Her fiance could be heard in the background saying, "Probably hiding from the fire marshal." I blocked her for several weeks after that. Christopher's business calendar and contact system started falling apart because everything was synced through accounts I'd set up years earlier when I was still trying to be helpful. Marcus's home Wi-Fi network that I'd configured was having constant issues. Victoria's wedding website that I'd built was glitching because she'd changed settings without understanding the technical implications. They all started reaching out more frequently, not with apologies or genuine concern, but with demands disguised as requests for help. Christopher would text saying, "You need to fix my calendar before I miss something important." Marcus would call asking me to drop off tools he'd left at my old place years ago, expecting me to provide free delivery service. Victoria would send urgent messages about her wedding website errors, never saying please or thank you, just assuming I'd fix whatever she'd broken. I started saying no to everything, not rudely, not dramatically, just no. When Christopher demanded I fix his technical problems, I told him to call tech support. When Marcus wanted his tools back, I told him to come pick them up himself. When Victoria's wedding website crashed, I told her to hire a professional. The escalation was swift and predictable. Victoria showed up at my apartment one afternoon, pounding on the door until I opened it, screaming about how I was sabotaging her special day. When I told her to leave my property, she tried to push past me. I blocked her path with my foot, she slapped my arm, I gently pushed her back, and she stormed off shrieking about how I was dead to her. Christopher called later ranting about respect and family loyalty and how I was embarrassing everyone. I hung up on him mid-sentence. Marcus texted, "Dude, you're being insane." I didn't respond. That's when I implemented my real strategy, the one I'd been unconsciously planning since the night they laughed at my burning house. I started systematically removing myself from every digital system I'd ever set up for them. I logged into all the accounts where I was the administrator and removed my access. I changed passwords on anything registered in my name. I deleted myself from shared subscriptions I'd been paying for out of habit. I reset the Wi-Fi routers I'd purchased for them years earlier, texted the new login information to the family chat, then logged out permanently. I sent Marcus a calendar invite to pick up his tools within a week or lose them. When he didn't show, I sold the entire collection on Facebook Marketplace for $75 and texted him the receipt. Victoria's wedding website collapsed completely. She lost her entire RSVP list, her gift registry went offline, and half her guests couldn't find the venue information. She bombarded me with increasingly frantic messages, then showed up at my apartment again making threats. I told her I'd call the police if she didn't leave immediately. Christopher couldn't access his business contacts or calendar anymore. Marcus's home office setup stopped functioning. Victoria's wedding was descending into logistical chaos. And suddenly, the family members who'd spent years treating me like their personal tech support and emotional punching bag were discovering exactly how much they'd relied on systems they'd never bothered to understand. The group chat became a constant stream of panic and blame. They demanded I fix everything immediately, threatened to cut me off completely, tried to guilt me with family obligation speeches. I didn't respond to any of it. Marcus confronted me at a gas station, trying to intimidate me into backing down. When he attempted to shove me, I shoved him back and told him to grow up. He called me a loser, peeled out of the parking lot, and I never saw him again. 3 years later, they're still calling, still texting, still trying to manipulate me back into their dysfunction. But I learned something profound from watching my house burn down while my family laughed. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to let them experience the natural consequences of their choices without your intervention. I'm not angry anymore, not plotting further revenge, not waiting for apologies that will never come. I'm just living my life without the constant background noise of people who mistake cruelty for humor and manipulation for love. And honestly, the silence is more peaceful than I ever imagined possible. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, if you've ever had people who are supposed to protect you turn your pain into their entertainment, I want you to know that walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself, possibly for the first time in your life. Sometimes the most radical act of self-love is refusing to participate in your own destruction, even when the people demanding your participation share your DNA. The phone still rings sometimes, but I don't answer anymore. I've got better things to do than provide technical support for people who celebrated my house burning down. And you know what? That's exactly the kind of boundary that toxic people never see coming until it's too late to cross.